my gosh, I can't put this book down. I'm Mike Briggs. This is the show Artists and Authors, and I love to meet an author when you're reading the book, because you always have a million questions. Like, you just say, man, if I could just talk to the author. Well, we called the author. He said, I'll come down. Steve, I have to look at Steve Cochron. Welcome, Steve Cochron. You've written an incredible book here. I can't stop reading it.
Well, thank you.
And he said, I'll come if you guys read the first 50 pages. You could have said read the first 5 because you can't stop.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's probably the greatest compliment you can give an author.
Yeah, you can't stop reading. And what I'm grabbed by right away was this guy's not me, but every man. He's waking up, he's hungover, he's got these alarm clocks going off and stuff. Then you start realizing, wait a minute, this isn't in today's world. This is just a jump above us, because a lot of the technology we could recognize, we don't quite have it yet. But what do you call it? Dystopian, futuristic?
I call it gonzo futurism, but it is speculative fiction.
Okay. Speculative means it could happen, it could come true? Or?
I kind of took the course society is currently on and took logical jumps of where the technology would take us. At the end of the day, technology evolves, but we are, as people, are just people.
Right.
And so our behaviors, our interactions with the world we live in are going to be human interactions. So where does that take us? Well, I said, you know what? This is where we're at. This is where technology is going. I see this as our near future.
And it does pick up kind of where we left off. Every person, well, you know, there's this, what do you call the COVID and the 20s. I'm thinking, the 20s? Oh, yeah, we're in the 20s.
We're in the 20s,
We're in the 20s. And, you know, the global shutdown in the economy that led to this and this and this. I don't want to give any spoiler. But it's all an extension of today.
Yeah.
All the technology, all the, you know, how they got to where they were and stuff like that. That's what's so very clever about this book. So, and by the way, I said, kind of sounds like us, but yeah. You know, guy wakes up with a hangover and this and this and this. But this is just a good old-fashioned murder mystery.
At the end of the day, yeah, it's just a good old detective noir. And actually, the whole thing takes place in Manchester Mall.
I did not catch that. But I'm reading along, and all of a sudden there's surprises like Central Valley, Fresno.
Everything I write is about the Central Valley.
Very good.
I'm a Fresno boy. I love my hometown. And it tends to seep into everything I write about. My next book, Morticians, which is coming out next year, also takes place in the Central Valley, and that's a zombie apocalypse story.
Zombie apocalypse. Now, I always, when I get authors, I ask the questions. I want answers to some questions I have. But we need to hear about the book, about you. First of all, the book is called,
Alameda.
Alameda. Why Alameda?
Well, Alameda is Spanish for Grove of Trees,
okay.
And it's something that we do in American malls is that we name malls to be these pleasant, wonderful locations you want to be at.
There's the cover, by the way.
I thought Alameda was a beautiful name for a location that isn't beautiful. And we seem to do that in some of our lower economic housing areas. It's a grove, it's a villa, it's something special, but when you get there, it's not. It's a little bit harder, it's a little bit darker.
Now, Alameda, by the way, this is your second book.
That is my second book.
And the first one was a memoir.
The first one was a memoir under a pen name. It was called Casper Suburban Scumbag by Abel T. Fletcher, my writing name.
Your nom de plume.
And,
is it a nonfiction book?
It is a memoir. That one's actually about my early 20s and growing up in the Central Valleys as a skater punk, getting involved in drugs and alcohol, and then eventually recovering. Now, it's not a recovery story. It is really kind of a humorous telling about the predicaments that I seem to have put myself in my early 20s.
And what's that book called?
That one's called Casper Suburban Scumbag.
And that's going to be out on audiobook soon.
That is actually already out on audio. That has been out for about a year now.
Okay, and this one might be out on audio?
That one I'm shooting for. Our audiobook should be out in about 2 months.
Okay. Now, and by the way, this could be purchased where?
Amazon and Kindle.
Amazon and Kindle. Now, we have coxonmedia.com, and you also have an Instagram, Coxon Media. They can find out more there, I would imagine.
That is correct.
Like, if after this interview they I forgot where they said I could order it, they could go to your website and
They definitely can do that.
Amazon, how hard is that? So.
Well, actually, believe it or not, you do need to put Alameda, a novel, by Stephen J. Cochron, because apparently Alameda being a location in California, there are a great many books about Alameda.
Now, sometimes when I'm looking up books, I just put the author's name. That might get them there also.
That would help. It helps in Amazon. It doesn't help with Google. You put my name in Google, and you get a bunch of obituaries.
A bunch of poor old Steve Cochron. Okay, well, tell us about the book. I kind of jumped in. What do you want our viewers to know? Well, buy it for one. So
yeah, well, it's in previous interviews we've called it the Sunburn Book. It's a type of book that once you start reading it, you can't put it down. So please don't read it outdoors because you will get a sunburn. It is the tale of Security Chief Omar Hernandez as he investigates a death of one of his residents. In the future, the malls are all converted to living facilities, and inside these living facilities, they have security forces to uphold the law. Everything is streamed 24/7, so how does someone get murdered in an environment that is recorded nonstop? Well, in Alameda, we discuss how that happens, why something like that could happen, and it's a human tale about a single man struggling to fight against the machine.
And there is a machine, isn't there?
There is always a machine in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I just in one paragraph, just you so quickly connected us with this young girl. I don't know how much I should talk about it, but I just want to compliment that. Just here's she is, a little blonde girl working on her master's, and everybody loved her, and
well, originally the story started with her. I wanted to tell the story through her eyes. When I first came up, I was like, well, I was driving back down from Oregon. I was thinking, well, what are we going to do with all these malls in California that nobody wants to shop at anymore? I go, well, let's turn them into living facilities. And I wanted to tell that story. And at first, the story started with Lucia. And who is Lucia? Why? What's her story? And she was developed originally as the protagonist, the heroic character, who then gets killed. And then quickly, once I came to that, well, how does she die? Then my Omar character was developed. And I fell in love with Omar and his brokenness. I started with the hero, and she's kind of angelic in nature. And then Omar, which is this anybody. And I fell in love with the anybody, and well, what's his story, and how does he save the day? How does he help the girl?
What also is interesting is that you build in. There's these hierarchies. No matter if you're in the past or in the future, there's hierarchies of humans.
There's always a pecking order.
A pecking order. There you
go. Omar, as the everyman, is not very high up on that pecking order.
Now, what comes next? You got another book coming?
Yeah. We're having. I am currently working on Morticians, which is the zombie apocalypse story, and that follows a local boy by the name of Mark Vang, who grows into, and it's the hero's journey. He starts out Vang, V-A-N-G.
There's a lot of familiar surnames in this book, being based in Fresno.
Well, like I said, I was born and raised here, and
Hernandez, De La Torre, and
exactly.
Your next book, Vang, and we all know thousands of Vangs.
Well, actually, Mark Vang is someone I grew up with.
Oh, nice.
His family were immigrants that came to America. He was one of the firstborns in the Central Valley, and that's why it's a mixed bag. His parents wanted him to have an American name, so they named their kids after the local street sign. So Mark actually has a brother named Shaw.
All right, good. Well, I want to ask you about process, if it's okay.
Go right ahead.
I'm fascinated about that. Before I do that, I want to say congratulations, because anybody could write a book. Anybody could write a book, but only very few can finish writing a book.
That is correct.
Yeah. And you finished, so congratulations. So how do you develop? You said you started developing around the girl, maybe the protagonist. Is it all in your head, or do you start shaping it on papers?
So here's my process. I get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see my morning post. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's a picture, where I use Instagram like I'm punching into work. Here I go, I'm getting started. And I write for about 2 to 3 hours. Whatever story I'm developing, whatever I'm working on, 2 to 3 hours. And then around the afternoon, I go for a walk with my wife, and we talk. And I told her what I'm working on. I spitball ideas, and the stories just naturally develop over time. The hardest part about writing is just committing yourself to the task of writing. And by forcing myself to sit at the computer and go, no, this 2 hours, that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to write, and that's how it comes out. Sometimes it's not the greatest thing in the world. Believe it or not, after a couple of walks with my wife, I figure out what the problem is. More like she guides me a little bit.
But it doesn't matter how the writing's going. You stick to it for your
That's right.
Yeah. I always say, what should writers do? Well, they should write. My first career, I was a classical guitarist.
Okay.
Woke up at 5 o'clock, played my scales, my arpeggio, did my exercise, and that's what I did all day long. I didn't go, work at Burger King, and at night when I get home and tired, I'd try to do my career.
Right.
Writers should write. So I'm glad to hear you say it.
I think it was Robert A. Heinlein who says an artist has to produce to be an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, a photographer takes photos.
Right.
A painter paints, and a writer should write, and you just kind of shift through it and get the best from the top, and that's what you put forth. So,
like anything, you can't be afraid to fail.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
gonna have some failures in there. So, hey, speaking of photography, when I was a kid, you're younger than me, but I was a photographer. We'd take a roll of film, 12 photos, we'd scrape together the money and get them developed and see how they came out. Today, what a great time to be a photographer. Digital.
My mom is a photographer as a hobby. She used to live down in Baja. She would photograph the Baja 500, and she'd just sit out there and she'd shoot. And she's not a world-renowned photographer, but you shift through all the pictures she's taken, and she's got great shots of trucks almost hitting her.
But nowadays, you have the word processor. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
How did they write in the old days on those yellow tablets and edit? And
I still write like that. I do both. There's an experience of doing both. I actually walk around with notebooks all the time, and I write ideas down. I'll be at a bar having a cocktail with somebody, and it's like,
you
then you write it down. And sometimes it's a big enough idea, you've got to explore the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The word processor is where things are developed. It's where you're machining out the work, right? But not having a pen and paper on hand is detrimental to an author.
Yeah, once I take it off the notes and start typing it, now you're developing as you go. You get ideas and stuff like that. So now, what about the middle of the night? Do you get ideas and wake up and write them down?
Yes.
Yeah.
My office is right next to my bedroom.
Yeah.
I always have a notepad. My word processor is just a mouse click from turning it on. It is actually something my wife, I say I get up at 5 o'clock. Often I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I start just going to work.
Just start going to town.
You can have a dream. You can wake up in the middle of the night and immediately your brain goes, this is what we're thinking about. Mm-hmm. And the problem you were working on that you couldn't figure out the day before comes to you at 3 a.m. and you got to put it out there.
I get that. Well, Steve, I go on for hours doing this, the process. I love to talk to authors, how they do it, especially those who actually got it printed and published in paper. We'll talk about that process another time, but anything else you want our viewers to know?
Nope, just check out Alameda, a Novel by Stephen J. Cochron. You can find it on Amazon or Kindle, and in 2 months you can look for it on Audible.
On audible.com. Now, if people want to reach you, they could go to coxandmedia.com.
Yeah, they can email me at coxandmedia.com or Stephen at coxandmedia. And I'm also really prevalent on Instagram. I post at least 2 or 3 times a day. You can direct message me on Instagram. Right. And I'm also on Facebook as Stephen J. Cochron.
I'm telling you, anytime you could get a book and the author's accessible and you could ask him a million questions, wouldn't that be great all the time? Anyway, Stephen Cochron, I'm glad to know you. I'm glad that you gave me the assignment to read 50 pages. And we'll have you back again soon.
Well, finish the book and have me back. We'll talk about it.
I'll ask you a million questions. I'm Mike Briggs, hosting Authors and Artists for today. Stick around. We got another author coming up. And with Austin Reed's going to talk to him. We'll be right back after these messages.